There will probably be a meeting on accessibility next month, but I expect that to be largely for people who are interested in developers. I think there are some people here who've got a real interest in accessibility. And what I really want to have at this meeting is for those people to express their concerns and interests and questions to the people here who regard themselves as developers. But before that, I'd like everybody to briefly introduce themselves in a few words so we can put something behind the face. The other thing I want to say is that I've established a mailing list called Tech Ideas, where things that don't have any other good place to be discussed can be discussed. And things that involve a lot of projects at the same time might be best placed at Tech Ideas so that at least we know that they're happening there. So the outcomes from this meeting, if you want to share some ideas, I suggest you join the Tech Ideas list and send a message there. And I'll put all that sort of information on my blog tomorrow. So I think we all know that I've got a blog. And for the moment, we're going to use that. I'll use that as a place to disseminate information to you if I don't have your mailing address. So having said all that, I want to get on to the introductions. One more coming in. Just a reminder that you're being recorded. I'm going to briefly introduce myself. I've been using TeX for about 30 years. I was the LaTeX officer at the Open University, and I'm now retired. Mathematical research is my main interest, but I still have a very strong interest in TeX. And my main interest in TeX, apart from using it, is finding what's causing our problems and seeing what can be done to solve them. In other words, sort of blue sky stuff. So would somebody like to volunteer to come in next? And I'm going to mute my microphone.
Hello? Can anyone hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So I'm a PhD data scientist. I lean a lot on the mathematical side. I'm also completely blind. And so I use LaTeX on a daily basis. I've been using it since I was in college. And while it works well enough for me, I'm always wondering if there's ways of making things easier. I have found some tools online that work well with JAWS, and so like JAWS can read LaTeX, speaks it out in English, and that's been really nice. But again, there's still things that I think can be improved. So.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ivan. I run a small publishing company, math textbooks, and I was always been interested in finding ways how to make PDFs more accessible, tagged PDFs, etc.
Hello, my name is Bert. I am a LaTeX user. I've been using it for almost 20 years. I'm also blind, and I was so happy when I discovered LaTeX because it gives you control over layouts as well as formally. And this was great because you could do it in a simple text editor. But yeah, now it would be nice to be able to create accessible PDFs. Why? Because you can then share them with the broader public, where also accessibility of all available documents is so important. And I was a bit sad to read a few years ago that we as LaTeX users are so much behind compared to Microsoft. But when I started using LaTeX, that would definitely not be how I saw it, because at that point the math editor in Word was completely inaccessible. So yeah, I really owe so much to LaTeX. And yeah, so it would be nice to be able to produce these PDFs which have basically tagged formula as well. But also, the reason is also that then hopefully also publishers are going to use these methods to produce their PDFs, because it is not always possible to get the source code. So it would just be nice for me as well to be able not only to produce them, but just to download any file from the web and read it straight away, including all the formula error-free.
Hello, everyone. My name is Manish. I am software developer, and my interest is to find how accessibility can be improved and finding out the problems. And this is my first time joining a forum like this. So I'm looking forward for learning.
Hi everyone, my name is Saurabh. I'm also joining this TeX talk for the first time. I'm a software developer, and my interest is also to learn what kind of problems people face to make math accessible. And I'm very interested and curious to solve those problems. In the past, I do have some background working in that domain in my previous startup, but I wanted to pick up those threads again I left in my startup to start building accessible math solutions. And that's why I'm very interested to understand what is the current landscape, what problems people face, and come up with some innovative solutions to solve challenges in this domain.
Hi, my name's Tammy Stitz, and I'm an engineering librarian. I've been using LaTeX for probably about 10 years, and I'm very interested in how to make mathematics accessible in the electronic environment, whether it be PDFs or another format.
Hi, I'm Nathan. I work in the Technion in IT in the math department. I have a PhD in mathematics, but I've been doing IT things and online homeworks for close to 20 years. And Israel passed the accessibility law, and the regulations were formulated over the last couple of years. And we came to realize how difficult it is to provide accessible PDFs with math and Hebrew. So we're very interested in seeing the advances in PDF production in terms of output from LaTeX. But definitely there are more accessible options at present of taking LaTeX source and converting to an HTML format. HTML and MathJax is currently the top of the line features for serving math and text in an accessible manner. And PDF in terms of what's coming out of LaTeX has a long way to go. But for example, Ross Moore is very involved in advancing a project to eventually fill in some of the gaps, whether it's tagging or text extraction, Tug Talks from the conference this past summer. He reported quite a lot of progress in providing features which will eventually make LaTeX able to produce more accessible PDFs that are available at present.
Hi everyone, my name is Chris Hughes. I'm in the School of Maths and Stats at the Open University. So I used to work with Jonathan at the Open University. So I have a particular interest in trying to make mathematical content accessible to all users, but I am particularly focused on trying to support blind and visually impaired students. And my experiences have been very consistent with what the last speaker said, that HTML with the mathematical content rendered using MathJax has been the most successful for the students and for users of assistive technology. So I have a particular interest in trying to get from LaTeX source code into, well, either HTML or else into XML and onwards from there. The main tool that I use is Make4HT, which employs Tech4HT. That's me.
I'm Boris Doubrov, and I come from PDF industry. We're a service company, but also a member of PDF Station, and I take part in ISO working groups that develop PDF UE standard, PDF for universal accessibility. And we've been involved into several feasibility studies around how to generate good tagged PDF documents, like well accepted by the industry, but as well as by IT technologies from LaTeX directly. So in particular, we collaborate with Torino Group, developing accessibility package, if you know this, as well as we just started a new activity directly with LaTeX project people. So it's a liaison working group between PDF Association and LaTeX project, aiming to set to, well, probably in a few years to come up with better solutions than exist today.
Hi, Akashdeep here. I'm a PhD student at IIT Delhi and also co-founder of a assistive technology startup, which is working on content accessibility. As part of my PhD, I'm more looking at focusing on equations accessibility, where I'm focusing on how we can identify the semantic from the document and improve the audio rendering of the equations, as well as how we can reduce the cognitive load when a listener is listening to the equations using the auditory interface.
Hello, my name is Steve Jacobs. I come from a company that develops applications that do a lot with math to make it accessible. Saurabh Gupta and I work together. And I'm here to learn more. We can always improve what we're doing.
Hello, I'm Emma Cliffe. I work at the University of Bath, where I currently head up the Mathematics Resources Centre. And I've been involved in trying to transform lecturers' notes into accessible formats to support, in the first place, students who may have a visual impairment, but in latter cases, just any student. Starting off with using very ad hoc processes about 15 to 20 years ago. And now we are, like many people, converting to HTML and MathJax because that's the place we can get to from the LaTeX that the many users tend to write. We use a very ad hoc collection of tools still, including TeX-HT, but with other things before and after it. There are so many math lecturers writing so many notes that we can't support them all to meet the new laws. It's very well producing formats specifically for individual students, but now we have a much larger scale problem, and we really need methods that individual lecturers can pick up and use. And at the moment, the only successes we're having there is getting people to write in our Markdown, Bookdown, etc. And then they can transform themselves. And some users have had some success with LWARP. We really need tools which any person, any lecturer who is used to writing LaTeX can pick up and use, because there's too many people for us to support directly now.
Hello, my name is Thomas Mohabt. I'm a lecturer in the Department of Mathematical Sciences in Liverpool. I'm also the disability coordinator for the department. And well, we produce lots of our resources for students in PDF. But when I look in our virtual learning environment, I see most of these documents being flagged up as not accessible, but because by default, the PDF is not tagged, and probably screen readers cannot read out the formulas out of the PDF. Now, I'm a moderately competent LaTeX user, but I would like to learn more about solutions that I can then offer to my students. But clearly, I'm looking for something that I and my colleagues can apply with minimum hassle, because we don't have extra resources for implementing solutions. But if there are things that help to make the material that we provide for our students more accessible, this is something I would like to learn about.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Todd Schwanke. I work at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the Disability Services Office called the McBurney Disability Resource Center. And I guess in short, we're just always, math continues to be a challenge, particularly an end-to-end solution from writing, reading, and then grading and giving reviews back to students. So continually looking for kind of options really around higher education and more advanced math.
Hi everyone, my name is Zhou. I'm from American Printing House for the Blind. I'm here to learn how to make electronic math more accessible. Thanks.
I think most people have introduced themselves, but a few haven't. If you haven't, then I invite you to do so. And if you introduce yourself from the chat, could you also introduce yourself by voice? That will help people who are listening to the video. And when we're finished with the introductions, I'll have a look at the comments in the chat. If you want to ask questions, I can sort of marshal them together. And I'll figure out how we're going to go forward from the, we've got a very diverse audience here, and I think that's wonderful, but it's also not quite clear how to proceed.
Okay, maybe I'll jump in here. This is Nelson Beebe for the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. I think of the group that's gathered here, I have the longest association with TeX because for me, it goes back to the 1970s before TeX really escaped from Stanford. In 90 to 92, I was president of the TeX users group. During the 90s, I was part of an advisory board for Adobe before PDF became a release technology. This was when they were trying to decide whether this should be a completely commercial product or whether there should be free readers, as finally came to pass on the basis of our recommendation. I spent a lot of time over the last 25 years on bibliographic collections and have a fairly large archive of about 1.6 million entries covering fields of math and science and physics and typography and Unix and many other things. So I'll pass the baton.
Hi, my name is Laura. I am from the US in Minnesota. I work as an access services specialist with graduate and doctoral students. I'm just finishing up my doctorate degree in special ed and then looking to go on to assistive technology. And I'm just looking for ways to make documents accessible for students. And this group looks really great. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Nicolás. I have a master's degree in math and I'm starting a PhD in computer science. I work with blind and visually impaired students since 2017. And I want to find and also create accessible ways to teach them college math. Thank you.
Okay, so any more introductions? Jim, if you introduced yourself.
Yes, sure. Sorry for being late. I had some technical difficulties. So my name is Jim Carlson. I'm a retired mathematician. And for the last several years, I've been doing some software development, mainly a LaTeX on the web application called minilatex.lambdera.app. And I'm just here to learn more about accessibility.
Anyone else? You're being recorded. It's an opportunity. Okay, I'm going to say a few words about the TeX Hour. This TeX Hour has been started since December, and it sort of came out of a bit of a crisis in the UK tech users group. But it was started as an attempt to solve the problems there, but it's changed into something else, and that's fine, because I like what it's changed into. And we're settling into a sort of meet every week with a different theme every week. And this month it's beginners last week, accessibility this week, outputs, multiple outputs from a single format, transformation and the like, the following week. And then for the last week in February, it's being archival, which is related to getting the same output from the same device, and being archival has got some relationship with making a service available in the cloud, which makes sense for some of the issues that people have raised. Now, next month, I expect that we'll have a TeX Hour on accessibility, but it won't be like this one. It will be a developers mainly, and anybody else that wants to come along. Whereas here, I want to sort of turn things inside out and make it focused on the practitioners of accessibility and give them an opportunity to speak to the developers so the developers can learn. And I'm thinking that perhaps in 3 months' time or so, I could have another TeX Hour that's big on accessibility, so we can all meet together again in May or June. And in the interim, there'll be the TeX Ideas list, where we hope you can keep a track of what's going on. There's a couple more things I want to say. Prior to this earlier today, I put 3 posts up on my blog, one of which is comments from the blind math list, one of which is a small list of resources, and the third of which is a report, a précis of a report that Chris Hughes prepared on an accessibility study that was done in conjunction with the Royal National Institute for Blind People in the UK, relating to accessibility for maths and statistics courses. And I learned a great deal from Chris's talk on that, which I was privileged to hear in December, and on reading through the report. So I think the big opportunity here is for people who have got problems in terms of delivering accessibility to students to have the ear of developers. Everything's being recorded. After it's recorded, I'll load it up to YouTube, which will give me a transcript. And I'll try and circulate the transcript to the people that want it so that it can be corrected. And then it almost becomes something that's also readable as well as video watchable. And I'll close the meeting for 7:30 because it's scheduled for an hour, but anybody can stay on afterwards if they want to chat. But I will bring this meeting to an ordered and disciplined close at 7:30. And I invite the people who have a particular responsibility for teaching or supporting the teaching of disabled and visually impaired students to come to the center of the stage, and we'll listen.
Hello, this is Bert, and I had a question because so there is now more and more an interest in getting PDF files which are accessible, so also the formula to be read out. And it's a bit difficult to know what exactly works best because it seems that there are many different or several different packages that you can put in the preamble. But which one would now be the most state of the art? And also, would there be... Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Because I heard some So yeah, so which one would work best? And also, it seems that sometimes you need to install also specific dictionaries on your computer for a screen reader. So a screen reader specific dictionary, so that you will only be able to use them these PDF files if you have JAWS installed or NVDA installed. But is there maybe also a system where the formula basically are tagged, like sometimes you have them tagged, like sometimes you also have images tagged in HTML on web pages. So would that be possible to have a formula with a basically a tag that you can then read as simplified LaTeX in your PDF file for those who want to do that? So I was wondering what your view is on this is, and which packages are most up to date, and what is exactly on the market, because it seems that there are several packages now with different, very similar titles.
I'll briefly say, Bert, that you know much more about this than I do. And apart from general words, I can't give you specific advice. The one piece of general advice I can give is that technical accessibility is sometimes not the same as accessibility in the field. And if the student can't access the content, and as far as the student's concerned, it's not accessible, even if it passes all the accessibility tests. But there are people here who may be able to answer Bert's question, and if they can, perhaps they could chip in.
Well, hi, Bert. It's Chris Hughes here from the Open University. I'm not sure about the most up-to-date version, but the one of the packages that that I know of that does, I think, what you're describing, where you load the package in the preamble of the document, and then it assists with making the PDF document accessible via an updated dictionary, is the accessibility package, which is I think it's led by a team out of Italy. I'm going to post a URL in the chat box there. It's a package that I've explored a little bit. I couldn't say how it compares with other packages that do the same thing, because I didn't know that there were others. So I'd be really interested to know if others have information on other packages that do similarly. But in the small number of experiments that I did, I was able to replicate what the authors say it does, in that I was able to update the dictionary for JAWS and have it read the mathematical content in a meaningful way. I will say that in the experiments that I did, and perhaps it was just my using of the package, but I wasn't able to kind of to drill down and explore the mathematical content at different levels in the same way that I can do when I render the mathematical content in HTML with MathML using MathJax. That's me.
Hi, this is Emma. We haven't yet found a method of converting to PDF, which we are happy with in terms of accessibility. So we focus on conversion to HTML with MathML and MathJax for the renderer, and provide, and we compile from a single source to multiple output formats. I will also say that the majority of students who have a disability access plan within our Department of Mathematics actually don't select the technically accessible HTML, MathML with MathJax. They select what we call clear print PDF, which is PDF with following the RNIB clear print guidelines as far as they make sense for mathematics. And so what Jonathan says about accessibility, it's not always about whether the document is technically accessible. So at the moment, we haven't found a method of providing for all students what they need from one format. And so we think we'll be compiling to multiple formats for some time to come.
Would it actually not be good sometimes to have Blackboard on board, for example, which many universities are using, because Blackboard offers to convert documents to accessible formats, so Word, for example, to Braille or to audio. But actually, yes, LaTeX seems to be the perfect start to create accessible documents, because everything is basically described in ASCII. So could also, instead of labeling the PDFs as inaccessible when you upload your PDFs, which you have then created with MikTeX, it would be great if at some point Blackboard, if you could just upload your LaTeX file and then Blackboard would create for you HTML or an accessible PDF or an accessible audio file.
My view of that is that would only work as any conversion from LaTeX with a subset of LaTeX, and that's usually the problem. I think you're referring to the tool Blackboard Alley.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that also actually there's a version which integrates with Moodle, and we've had that switched on at our university for a year. Currently, if you give it a fully accessible Word document with fully accessible equations in, which would be read aloud by screen readers which have implemented the correct API stuff for the new Word equation format, it will Blackboard Alley will just ignore the equations, so it can't even unfortunately convert quite a well-formed subset which is using a MathML like language into a different version. So I think Blackboard Alley would have a lot of work to do before they'd even consider going from LaTeX. They should probably focus on getting Word and PowerPoint right first.
I'd like to attempt to change the subject, which is I've read the Blind Math List, which is from the National Federation of the Blind in the US, and contribute occasionally when I think it's appropriate. I noticed there are a number of people who are responsible for disabled support and the like from the US here today, and I wonder if they could sort of describe the situation they're in and the problems that they face, if anybody's willing to do that.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
I can.
Okay. Yeah, so this is Dev again. This is the blind data scientist. And I thought maybe briefly I just kind of share my experience here in the US. So this is a very individual account, but you know, maybe you could stir discussion. So I recently just got my PhD, so I just got through graduate school, and there were a number of tools that I used to help me out, but they may not be the best tools. So one with regards to LaTeX. So I'm fortunate enough that I'm in a field, machine learning, where at least conferences, conference papers and journal papers, typically the authors will upload their preprints to the archive online, archive.org, and they typically upload not just their PDFs, but also their source files. So, and this has almost become standard practice. So again, this is at a professional level, but at least at that level, I can freely find anyone's LaTeX files for their research papers, which is super helpful. As far as reading LaTeX itself, of course, reading LaTeX and listening to it with JAWS is tedious. But a long time ago, I found a project called LaTeX Access. This is on SourceForge. And I found this well before I was familiar with version control and all that. So I couldn't really, I didn't contribute to that project, but it's a set of Python scripts that intercepts JAWS and basically translates LaTeX and feeds that into JAWS. And it works well enough. It's, you know, it's not going to be as great as, you know, MathML, because, you know, when it sees, for example, F parentheses X, it's going to pronounce the parentheses. It doesn't understand that it should be read as F of X. So, but it works pretty well. One thing I will also want to add is, one thing I like about this open source aspect is I can modify it. One issue with math is that there's no universal way of pronouncing math, and some people might prefer to listen to math one way as opposed to another way. And the ability for me to go in and format how I want my fractions to be read, for example, is very helpful. The last thing I'll say is PDFs. So as far as accessing PDFs, one software I use is called InfyReader. So I think Steve Jacobs is here. I think he can talk a lot more about InfyReader. But so InfyReader basically does OCR on a PDF, and it can return many formats. The one I prefer is LaTeX, and it does surprisingly well. Even with the most complex equations, I can make sense of them. Sometimes there's a mistake, and I do have to kind of use the surrounding context to understand what's going on. But it's way better than nothing, and it's a universal solution. And along with LaTeX access, it works pretty well. So at least for the time being, that's working well. Of course, I want to see this improve, and I'm interested to hear where HTML and MathML are going.
This is Todd at Wisconsin. Dev, I think that was a great lead in. And from the kind of the accommodation perspective, this is kind of the recurring topic that just comes up at conference after conference because it feels like it's not solved. There's not great tools. I think Dev really demonstrated the type of thing you have to do in terms of piecing things together, because there aren't tools out there that take you from end to end that support users from a variety of technology ability levels. The training's not there. There's not round trip tools where you, like I was saying before, you can read the math, do the math, turn it in, and then get the math back from your professor. And that's why PDF is a little bit concerning to me, because I think, yes, we could make PDFs accessible originating from LaTeX, but mainly for reading purposes, not for actually, I think, doing math. And let's see what else to add. I'm not sure if I mentioned, what's being reported from other countries is very, very similar to what we're experiencing, both in terms of the tools that we're using, the limits of those tools, the experiences from students. I think Emma mentioned, as far as what we think might be best isn't what always works for students or what students want, depending on, again, their technology, what type of math they're working with. And I think what you've seen on the blind math listserv is indicative of the repeating that happens over and over, because people keep trying to solve this or look for the tools. So people come on the list and say, okay, what packages of LaTeX do I need to use to have the best experience? How do I learn LaTeX? The support structure just isn't there. And so everybody just kind of has to navigate through it themselves and figure it out. And students just keep having the same experiences over and over, and we don't make a lot of headway. So unfortunately, not great news. That's why I'm interested in this conversation.
Yeah, this is Tammy Stitz. I've done accessibility research, and then also that's why I was interested in the mathematics. I make sure that my PDFs are accessible, but mathematics has always been a trouble or a problem for me. In fact, my thesis had a lot of matrices in it, and if it just reads at OCR, it's a hot mess. So I basically took the alt text and I wrote in there, and then you wouldn't have the flexibility that the one person spoke of, because you can say math differently. And then also it took a lot of time. And I know that who we turn our dissertations into and our theses, and it's great. In 2022, they want the PDFs completely accessible, but I don't think they realize the trouble they're going to have with the mathematics.
Any more on this theme? On this topic?
I'm just going to chime in again for a second that for those who are not aware, the TeX users group has an accessibility working group. And Ross Moore and some people are working very hard to try to add both tagging features and other features so that future versions of LaTeX will be much more capable than the current versions are. But we're still talking about things that are not publicly accessible. More there's samples of what they've done rather than something that anybody can go and run on their own LaTeX server, LaTeX compiler. But there's a vision to get far ahead of where we are today, and hopefully we'll, in the community, be there in another year or two.
If I may ask one very specific question about, I guess this would be HTML, MathML. So one reason why I haven't gotten much into it, I mean, right now it sounds like it's like did someone, okay. One reason why I haven't really gotten much into it is because I don't, it's not as ubiquitous, at least right now. So for example, when I go online, I do see, you know, MathJax rendered equations and stuff, let's say on Wikipedia. So maybe this is, I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's something specific to JAWS, but except for the most trivial equations, most of the equations, JAWS, it seems to struggle to read. It would hang as if it's processing something and then it would not speak it. And used to, like on Wikipedia, for example, I would just see the LaTeX attached to the graphic, which was at least, you know, even though it was tedious, I could at least read it. So I mean, maybe this is one other question is, you know, if MathJax is going to be a thing, you know, it seems like one place to start is to ensure that these screen readers can at least read it online on popular websites like Wikipedia or Stack Exchange or blog post, for example. Does anyone know what's going on there?
I think I may be able to shed some light. There's different ways to set MathJax up with different renderers and different things switched on and off. And the author as the original will set some defaults for that, but only one particular set of settings will work for JAWS. Now, once you set that once ever, that will then be stored in your browser settings, and that will be how the MathJax kind of displays for you until you clear your cache. But it does mean that you are kind of, unless someone has come along and said this is what you need to do to set it up so JAWS will work, then yeah, you'll just experience probably quite a lot of strange things happening.
I see. Okay, thank you. That's a great start at the very least. So yeah, this goes back to Todd's point too, right? That it seems like we have to do a lot of hunting sort of on our own to figure all this stuff out. It would be great if someone could sort of lay all this out for us from beginning to end.
Yeah, I think JAWS, the company that makes JAWS, did work with MathJax in the sense that although JAWS implements its own native reader for the MathML, they assured that would work with one of the setups of MathJax. And I think if you search enough on the JAWS website, there are some guidance documents on how to use it, but I suspect these are really well hidden, and it's a case of how do you find out about these things? Yeah.
Right, exactly.
I'm going to pick up on something Emma said, which was, to quote, how do we find out about these things? And I'm really heartened by the sharing of information and the way in which already in this hour-long meeting, some of us have been able to help each other. I'm very pleased with that. I'm also very pleased that this is recorded, which means the help that is being provided can be turned into a question and answer and published somewhere. And one of the things I think would be helpful would be that there's a clear and obvious place to go for information about these issues. It doesn't have to have all the information, but it should have links to all the information. In the tech community, we did have a very thorough and very sound FAQ, which was the first place to go if you had a question. You look in the FAQ, and some sort of FAQ for blind math or math accessibility would be quite helpful, but I think it has to be an international effort, and probably not just international, but also to cover multiple languages. I should say that I sent an invite to this meeting. I sent an invite to this meeting to the LaTeX 3 list and to the TUG accessibility list. And I don't know if anybody has come from those invites, but I've not had a response there. We've got about 10 minutes left. One thing I want to do is to have some sort of consent for what I'm intending to do in the future, which is to have another meeting like this in about 3 or 4 months' time, where practitioners of accessibility meet hardcore tech developers and that sort of thing. And I'm quite willing to change that, and it doesn't have to be held under the TeX Hour auspices. But does 3 to 4 hours seem like a... Oh, thanks, Tani, for saying that you came through the TUG accessibility list. That's really nice to know. Where was I? Yeah, I hosted this because I saw a need for it, and the attendance, I think, proves it. But I don't want to own it against anybody's wishes. So I'm going to stop now, but we need to come to a conclusion for 7:30 so that we finish at 7:30, and then anybody can stay afterwards for as long as they want. Well, not that long, but at least for half an hour. I'm going to stop, and we can have another question.
Nelson Beebe here again. There's another kind of accessibility issue that hasn't come up this meeting, and that's for people who have vision but are physically handicapped. A couple of years ago, we had a PhD student who successfully completed his PhD writing a thesis in mathematics, and it was entirely dictated with speech to text recognition and then subsequent editing to add markup. It was clearly a difficult task for him because he had very limited mobility except in a couple of fingers. But he did pull it off. Of course, the thesis office had a number of issues with niggling little picky things about formatting, and it took me about 20 to 30 hours of work to clean things up for him, but I felt that was a worthwhile investment because it would have taken him months to do what they were requesting him to do. But still, it's another form of accessibility. We shouldn't forget that not everybody can type easily.
This is Steve Jacobs, and I just wanted to mention that years ago, we experimented with a speech-driven math editor, and we never completed development of it because the resources required funding that we didn't have at the time. But if you'd like, is it Dr. Beebe? I'm not sure. I'd be glad to send you a link or post it in the chat.
It is, but I'm just Nelson to everybody. Yeah, I'd be happy to have a link because it's useful to know about these things, because for those of us who don't have some of these limitations, it's not the sort of thing one thinks about normally until you meet someone who has to face this problem and is stuck.
Okay, thank you.
Has anybody who hasn't spoken got something that they want to say? Or spoken recently?
Hi, Jonathan. Hi, everyone. It's Chris Hughes here again. I guess, the resource I'm about to share might not be entirely relevant to this group, but it's a project called Pretext, which is run out of community colleges in the Pacific Northwest of America, and it's written in an XML language. And from the XML language, one of the destinations is to produce LaTeX and to produce PDF. But then some of the other destinations are to produce HTML with mathematics rendered using MathJax. So one of the nice features about this is that the syntax of the mathematical content is LaTeX, but the syntax of everything else is kind of XML. So for an example of a project that's written in this Pretext language, I'm going to post a URL to what's called the Orca project, which is run out of Portland Community College in Portland, Oregon. And as a disclaimer, I used to work at Portland Community College, but I wasn't involved in this particular project. And you can see the source for this, for an example of it, at the URL posting here. And you'll see that it's written in XML with the mathematical content written in LaTeX syntax. And then you run all these different translation sheets and you get lots of different outputs. So again, it might not be entirely relevant to this group, but it does strike me as a strong project from an accessibility point of view with mathematical content.
I did just put just in the chat, but to agree with Chris, we've got a couple of lecturers who are kind of trying to do this on their own and didn't want to use our Markdown bookdown, and it's produced good output. And the team writing it seemed quite switched on with regards to accessibility questions when they're posed. So, and actively fixing.
I think it's perhaps time, in a moment or two, it'll be time for closing words. Is there one more topic? We've got time for one more topic or question or comment. Anybody really wants to say something?
Jonathan?
Yeah.
I want to thank you for pulling the community together, because I think as someone who's, I guess many of us have looked around what's happening, it's sort of all happening in small pockets of people doing a little bit here and a little bit there. And as you said, we really as a community probably need to organize a centralized website with the information and best practices, and nobody's picked up the ball yet. But if somehow among the people in the community here we can move things along, the community will be well served in the future. So thanks for pulling together this meeting and offering us a platform to meet and talk in.
Is that an offer to volunteer to help, Tani?
I'm deeply involved right now in web work and moving from a homegrown homework system to web work. And I'm overcommitted at present, so I'm not offering much time, but I'm definitely planning to follow the conversation. Okay,
that's a good excuse. I've got better things to do. I've got other things to do. I've got
other things to do.
Other things to do. I've got a special responsibility for. I'd appreciate somebody to just helped me a bit with taking this forward. What I intend to do to finish is the discussion we've had now. If we want to continue it by email, that we do it on the tech ideas list. And I'll put information about that on my blog. I'll put all the information I'm saying now on my blog. My next steps are to save this video and put it up to YouTube and get a transcript and make that available to everybody. And to move on to the next week's Tech Hour and the week after's Tech Hour. A month from now, we're going to do accessibility again, but I think it will be a much smaller meeting. And I think we're going to try and address some of the problems that have come up as being important in today's meeting, but not from the students' point of view, from the developers' point of view. So it's going to be much more developers meeting next month. I encourage you all to stay in touch, at least by reading emails and so forth. And I'm very pleased. I was a bit frightened to begin with about being the chair without an assistant with a meeting of about 24 people. And it turns out that it's been wonderful, that you all know when to speak and you all know how to listen. It's tremendous. And listening is really important. Listening is one of the most important skills. So I'm grateful that this has worked. And I hope that we can all meet together again in a similar way in something like May or June. It doesn't have to be for an hour and it doesn't have to be as part of a Tech Hour. But if we can all meet again in 3 months' time or so, that would be really great. I hope that the people that know more about accessibility than I could do can take a bit of a hand in taking that together and putting in an agenda. So the only thing now is just, I think, to say goodbye to those people that have lunch or something else to do and don't want to stay. Those people that want to stay on for a bit, that's fine too.
One more thing, Jonathan.
Yes,
Steve. If everyone that is interested could post their email address in the chat, it might help us contact each other if somebody said something that we're personally interested in. But I'll leave that up to you.
Okay, if you put your email address in the chat, I will take that to mean I'm willing for this to be distributed to the other people that put their email address in the chat. And we'll see what happens. The other way to sort of keep in touch is to have a look at the tech ideas list, which is a bit empty at the moment, which makes it easier to find things. And I'll start a thread on that list, precisely where people can identify themselves and repeat the questions that they've already asked, whatever. Oh, we're getting lots of email addresses in. That's a good suggestion, Steve. Any more good suggestions? Any more possibly good suggestions? Okay, I'm gonna just sort of sit here and chill out, let the email addresses come in and the people that want to leave, leave. And we can take a bit of a break. And those people that are still here in 4 or 5 minutes, hi, Jim, can have a conversation.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. This is Steve Jacobs. I really appreciate your pulling this Zoom meeting together. It could be the beginning of something very good.
We're being recorded, Steve. Thank you.
Hi, this is Laura. I'm wondering, I know it sounds like a lot of us are busy and might not have time to develop a website, but I'm wondering if we started like a Google Doc or an Excel sheet where we just share resources, if that might be a starting point. Just a suggestion.
My preference is to start a thread on tech ideas and just put your links into that thread. And then somebody else or other, but if you want to start that, Laura, that's fine.
Thanks.
Yeah, the main thing is, yeah, I'm all in favor of collecting list of links. Curating it's hard work, but it's a start. Yeah, share G if you want to do that, that's fine.